Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shobowale. On the program this week, as world leaders prepare for COP26 summit, UN warns world faces 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise. Plus, amid rising COVID-19 cases, officials in Russia, Ukraine and Britain urge citizens to get vaccinated. Just days before the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, the UN's Environment Programme said national plans to reduce carbon pollution amounted to weak promises not yet delivered. In its latest warning, the United Nations says current commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions put the planet on track for a catastrophic average 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century.
The clock is ticking. The emissions gap is the result of a leadership gap, but leaders can still make this a turning point to a greener future instead of a tipping point to climate catastrophe. The era of off measures and hollow promises must end. The time for closing this leadership gap must begin in Glasgow.
A call to action from United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as a newly published UN report found that despite international commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions, the planet is on track for a 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century, a rise Guterres calls catastrophic. The warning comes as world leaders are to meet at the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow next week to try to commit to a more ambitious climate pledge. It could be the last chance to reach the goal of the 2015 Paris Climate Accord to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius.
As world leaders prepare for COP26, this report is so another thundering wake-up call. How many more do we need? The recent IPCC report already showed that unless we reduce global carbon emissions by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, 100 months from now, we will not reach a 1.5 degree future.
The annual emissions gap report by the United Nations measures the gap between anticipated emissions and those consistent with the Paris Agreement. The report said G20 countries, which represent 80% of global emissions, are not on track to achieve their original or new 2030 pledges. And as extreme weather events like wildfires and floods continue to wreak havoc globally, the UN Secretary General says the heat is on for leaders to do more.
The heat is on. And as the contents of the report show, the leadership we need is off. And far off. We know that humanity's future depends on keeping global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. And we also know that so far, parties to the Paris Agreement are utterly failing to keep this target within reach.
British naturalist David Attenborough also warned world leaders this week that it will be too late to tackle climate change if the COP26 summit does not succeed.
I think it would be really catastrophic if the developed nations of the world, the more powerful nations of the world, simply ignored these problems. Do we say, oh, it's nothing to do with us and because our arms? We caused it. The question is, on a world scale, when is it too late? But it's difficult to see. If we don't act now, it will be too late. And we've been saying that for a long time. And we're saying, well, what do we mean by now? And we've said, well, in the next 10 years or something. And think, 10 years' time, that's a couple of budgets away, and politicians won't do things. We have to do it now.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as host of the summit, has cast the meeting as one of the last major chances to slow rising temperatures.
This is the opportunity for the world to try to stop climate change getting out of control. Do you know what I mean by climate change? To stop the temperatures from going up and up and up, and to keep the increase to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century. We've got to keep it, we've got to stop it overheating. We need as many people as possible to agree to go to net zero so that they're not producing too much carbon dioxide by by the middle of the century. Now, I think it can be done. It's going to be very, very tough, this summit, and I'm very worried because it might go wrong, and we might not get the agreements that we need. And it's touch and go. It's very, very difficult.
Around 50 countries plus the EU have pledged a net zero target for the middle of this century. This will bring the global temperature level down to 2.2 degrees Celsius, which will see dramatic and deadly impact from warming, but will be a step in the right direction from where the world is currently headed. But analysts say the problem is that many of these net zero goals are ambiguous, particularly amongst the world's 20 richest nations, where a dozen long-term plans are said to be quite vague. Many are hopeful that the summit in Glasgow, which begins on October 31st, will adopt plans to help limit the rise in the average global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050.
To the COVID-19 pandemic, as Russia fights a new wave of coronavirus, some of the country's hospitals are at breaking point. Authorities have blamed the rise in deaths and infections on slow vaccination rates. As a result, the government has put in place incentives to encourage people get the jab. The country has also reimposed partial lockdown measures.
The wards are full in this hospital in Volsky in Russia. As the country battles with a new wave of coronavirus infections, increasing numbers of admissions are putting the health service under strain, and many of its doctors and nurses are reaching breaking point. Hospital 1, just outside Volgograd in southwest Russia, had no extra bed capacity earlier this week.
At the moment, the hospital is completely full. It has 540 beds, 490 patients are now in the wards, and 50 patients are in the intensive care unit. We are completely full. Most of them are not vaccinated.
Yelena, a medic in the hospital in Volsky, has been working with COVID patients since the start of the pandemic, but says this time the situation in Russia feels more grave.
The disease is more severe, with more complications. I think that the last year it was easier. I already understand the value of human life, but here especially, this disease spares no one.
Only around 35% of the country have had 2 doses of a coronavirus vaccine. Record high cases, which have been blamed on slow vaccination rates, have prompted the authorities to reimpose partial lockdown measures. Unvaccinated over 60s in the capital Moscow have been ordered to lock down for 4 months, and schools are also closed. President Vladimir Putin has also ordered a series of measures including increased testing, tighter monitoring of mask wearing and social distancing, and an acceleration of the vaccine campaign with employees to get 2 paid days leave as a reward for getting inoculated.
Over in Ukraine, coronavirus cases among the country's population of 41 million have been climbing for weeks, prompting the government to tighten curbs last month. People in the capital, Kyiv, have been seen queuing out in their hundreds for COVID-19 vaccinations.
All beds designated for COVID-19 patients in one of the Kyiv hospitals were occupied this week amidst a surge in cases.
Many patients are being admitted to the hospital these days, compared to the previous wave. Patients are younger with more severe and faster course of the disease. While during the previous waves, we were able to influence the course of the disease, at least partially. Now, unfortunately, we're almost powerless because drugs which we used to use for such patients do not cease the process.
Ukraine's health ministry reported coronavirus deaths hit a deadly record of 734 on Tuesday, with hospitalizations up more than a fifth the previous week. One of Europe's poorest countries, Ukraine fell behind in the race for vaccine supplies this year, and so far only around 7 million in a population of 41 million are fully vaccinated. It's one of several countries in former communist Eastern Europe where vaccination rates are the continent's lowest, now experiencing a record-setting wave of infections with some of the highest death rates in the world. In a bid to combat vaccine hesitancy, Ukraine has made vaccinations compulsory for some government employees such as teachers. The new regulations appear to have had an effect. 1.5 million Ukrainians got their first or second shot last week, twice as many as the week before. Half of the country's regions have tightened lockdown restrictions after falling into the red zone classification. The government has imposed a requirement for vaccine certificates or negative tests to access public transport in the capital and shut schools in coronavirus hotspots. Ukraine has registered a total of 2.8 million coronavirus cases and over 64,940 deaths since the start of the pandemic. After a lull in the summer, the daily rate of new cases has jumped to around 16,000 to 20,000 in recent weeks, including 19,120 in the past day. The countries with the lowest vaccination rates in Europe are almost all located in the east, including both former Soviet states such as Russia and Ukraine, and ex-communist members of the EU such as Romania and Bulgaria.
And in Britain, daily cases of top 50,000 and deaths are rising. But Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government is refusing calls to reinforce measures that scientists say would help contain the virus. Since removing almost all restrictions in England in mid-July, officials have pinned hopes of the national vaccination program to keep COVID-19 in check. However, the country's efforts are now plagued by a sluggish campaign to deliver booster shots and inoculate young adults.
Britons in northwestern England are coming out to get their COVID-19 jabs as new infections and deaths rise across the country.
I am concerned because I lost my son-in-law last Sunday because he didn't have the vaccines, and the life support was turned off last Sunday. So it's important that everybody gets the first, second and mainly the booster.
I just haven't really given it much thought, to be honest. But my partner's mentioned it a couple of times, like, so I thought I'd best get it done and stay out of trouble with it.
Okay, thank you.
Officials say most cases are now among the young and unvaccinated.
But if you ask my professional colleagues in the hospital, they'll tell you that the people who are going to the hospital are younger people who have not been vaccinated. So the vast majority of the people who are being admitted to hospital are unvaccinated and more younger population. 12 months ago, we were all talking about older people, vulnerable people. Now it is the unvaccinated younger people who are becoming the vulnerable people.
Last week, the head of the National Health Service warned that the health system was close to the edge of being overwhelmed in many parts of Britain, and pressure is only going to increase as winter approaches. Britain reported 223 deaths from COVID-19 on Tuesday, October 19th, the highest daily figure since March. According to the UK's Office for National Statistics, the current rise in cases has been fueled by high levels of infections in secondary schools, where 7.8% of children were infected in the latest week. Prime Minister Boris Johnson insists a new COVID-19 lockdown is not currently on the cards. The Prime Minister had scrapped England's COVID restrictions in mid-July, and he says that while case numbers are rising, the trend is in line with what was expected.
So our autumn and winter plan always predicted that cases would rise around about now, and we're certainly seeing that in the numbers. We're seeing high levels of infection, but they're not outside the parameters of what was predicted or what we thought we'd see in the autumn and winter plan. But it's very important that people do follow the guidance on general behaviour, on being cautious, on wearing masks in confined places where you're meeting people you don't normally meet, wear a mask, wash hands, ventilation, all that kind of thing.
He also urges Britons to get their booster shots.
I think that people should be coming forward with the same spirit of determination to get their boosters as we saw earlier on this year. It's a very good thing to do. It gets you a huge amount of protection, and we always expected that we would see numbers rise right about now. That is happening, and you've also got to take into account the waning effectiveness of the first two jabs. So get your boosters now.
The UK raced ahead during the early stages of its immunization drive, but other West European countries have since caught up and surpassed its vaccine coverage. Britain's efforts are now plagued by a sluggish campaign to deliver booster shots to those aged above 50, as well as lower vaccine uptake amongst young adults aged 12 and over, at a time when students have returned to schools and universities.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, with boosters, masks and green pass, Israel sees its latest COVID-19 wave in retreat. You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. 4 months into one of its worst COVID-19 outbreaks, Israel is seeing a sharp drop in new infections and severe illness, aided by its use of vaccine boosters, vaccine passports and mask mandates.
Israel was struck by its fourth coronavirus wave in June, fueled by the fast-spreading Delta variant. Rather than imposing new lockdown measures, the government bet on a third booster dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for people aged 12 and up, mandated face coverings, and enforced the use of a green pass, proof of vaccination, recovery from the illness or a negative test for the virus at restaurants and other venues, even for children. Since peaking in early September, daily infections in Israel have fallen more than 80%, with severe cases nearly halved.
What brought down Delta in Israel was a combination of several components. It was the masks mandate, the green passes vaccine certificate policy, the massive testing, both with rapid antigen tests and PCR testing. But undoubtedly the most important impactful factor in bringing down Delta was the mass vaccination campaign with booster doses that allowed us to reach a very high percentage of those previously vaccinated with 2 doses with a 3rd dose. And that really brought us to the point we are today, with finally once again a very rapidly declining trends in both morbidity and severe morbidity.
Israel's living with COVID strategy, which has not come without cost or controversy, has kept schools and the economy open. Data shows that among people over 60, the first group to receive boosters, infections began declining rapidly about 2 weeks after 3rd doses were administered, while still climbing among other age groups.
Israel is the pioneer of the 3rd dose of the vaccines against the COVID virus. We're seeing profound efficacy of the vaccines. It's working, it's safe, and it's the way to defeat this virus. We need all together to work together in order to defeat it. We from Israel are going to share all the data, all the information, all the insights in this pioneering.
Since the administration of boosters, mostly unvaccinated, often younger people, are bearing the brunt of serious illness. They make up about 75% of hospitalized patients in severe condition, while those vaccinated with 2 or 3 shots account for a quarter of such cases.
We see that all the hospital is working regularly, and actually we're happy about it. We don't want patients to be at home and not coming to hospital because of curfew. But we can see that people that are not vaccinated, they are more sick. Young people coming here is very sick.
So far, about 4 million people have taken a 3rd shot, more than a third of Israel's population.
Israel was the first country to deal with the combination of the highly ineffective Delta strain and mass waning immunity in a single time. But it's not the last. Many other countries will experience this combination, potentially coupled with the effects of winter crowding and flu season. This will be a significant challenge to other countries, and I hope that some of the lessons learned from Israel will allow them to better prepare and better mitigate this threat.
However, some scientists argue that decision in late August to approve a 3rd vaccine dose for young adults and teens was premature, lacking clear evidence of a benefit. They argue the focus should still be on convincing unvaccinated people to accept the shots.
And staying in the Middle East, the famous London Wax Museum, Madame Tussauds, has opened its first branch in the region. The new branch, which is in Dubai, features 60 sculptures of famous figures from around the world. Let's take a look inside.
In an Arabic-themed setting full of palm trees and Dubai skylines, one of London's most loved tourist attractions, Madame Tussauds, has opened its doors for the first time in the Middle East. The new branch in Dubai is the Wax Museum's 25th international location.
But this is the first one to open here in the Middle East, here in Dubai on Blue Waters Island. The attraction offers quite a diversity. It allows the visitors to meet some of their most popular global celebrities from around the world. So if you walk around the attraction, you can definitely see the various theming and design elements that were done to make sure the attraction represents our host city, Dubai. So when you walk through the admission, you will see the golden palm trees, you will see the desert and the sand features.
Some of the 60 figures on display at the attraction were made exclusively for the Arab-themed museum.
We also have 16 new wax figures that were made specially for Madame Tussauds Dubai, which those are 16 figures from the Middle East. So we have likes of singing sensations like Nancy Ajram, we have Balkis, we also have various popular Middle Eastern figures from sports and all over industries.
The space is divided in different zones, each a theme ranging from royalty to sports, passing through politics, fashion, art, music, cinema, and even entertainment. However, making the wax figures come to life is not as easy as it seems.
Making a single wax figure takes around 4 to 7 months. There is 20 skilled artists involved in making the figures. They are sculptors, they are hair and makeup artists, they are special wax artists, painters. The artists will do somewhere around 500 different measurements.
Madame Tussauds, which originated in London, where it has 250 wax sculptures that attracts millions of visitors every year, also has branches in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Dubai, the region's tourism and business hub, is hoping to attract millions to the Expo 2020 World Fair, which opened earlier in October after a year-long delay due to the coronavirus pandemic.
And finally, it's a competition like no other. This month, beards of all sizes and shapes could be seen at the annual beard competition in Germany. Around 100 proud beard wearers came together for the Beard Olympics. Did the best beard win? Let's find out.
Around 100 proud beard wearers came together for the Beard Olympics and the German Beard Championships to compete with each other in categories such as Moustache Dali, Whiskers Freestyle, or Full Beard Natural with styled upper lip. Ralph Shores, winner in the category Moustache Imperial, has been wearing his beard for 7 years now and is a regular contestant in these competitions.
Now, I have managed to win first place in a German championship for the first time. I've already won first place in the South German Championships. Otherwise, I've always been runner-up, and it makes me very happy to finally win first place.
His competitor, Karl Musberger, wasn't as lucky as his beard.
My hair is not so good for such a super beard because mine doesn't grow that fast. There are beards that grow much better and then you can shape them much better. But I have a weak beard growth and you just have to take it as it is. It's that simple.
So what's the secret behind that well-groomed beard?
You use beard wax, but the good old hairspray and the hairdryer are the basic and most important things.
Once well styled, It was then up to the jury of hairdressers and barbers to present their mustaches and beards so they can finally crown the champions of the year.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shobowale. Stay safe.